So, this week is sort of a continuation from last week. Let's say we are facing an industry crash. I don't think we're actually, but let's just go with the hypothetical. Some of you might think that this time will be a bit different because we have our thriving indie scene. Even if most AAA studios and publishers die, we'll still be saved by the indies. I'd say at best that's unlikely, and honestly, I think it's impossible. When most people think indie, they think of the indie darlings like Hollow Knight, but most indie games are not these games. Some might meet the same quality and fun factor, but they aren't thought of nearly as fondly and don't garner the same number of sales. Some great indie games sort of just fade off within a few weeks of their release, and most don't even get the chance to appear on anyone's radar. One of the major things that actually started the indie explosion is easy-to-use game engines. Big studios are what keeps most of these engines that indies use afloat, either by sponsoring these projects or being major customers. Your weird puzzle platformer about getting over the loss of your family dog that only sold 600 copies is merely an accounting error to Unreal and Unity. Without the major studios backing those engines, you're much more likely to see those engines halt production, and in the age of always online, maybe even entirely go away. Now, that's not me being critical of anyone's programming skills. I'm definitely not that great when compared to most industry professionals, but without Unity or Unreal, I doubt most indies would know how to roll their own engines, especially ones that feature all the 3D functionality provided by the major hitters. I know I couldn't. Even if you aren't using 3D, the number of people who can make a game without an in-engine editor is much lower than those that can. Fewer big releases would also mean fewer eyes in the stores. I promise you, whenever a major game is released, it helps some smaller developers because gamers are browsing the stores, and it means there's a chance that some indie game will catch your eye. If you have no reason to browse the store, there are a ton of games that will go unseen. It's like when you go to the movies and you see a preview for some quirky indie film. Without going to see that blockbuster film, you would never know the indie film's existence. Now that you do know, the odds of you going to see it have increased exponentially. Then we have the bandwagon effect, which is once something either becomes cool or uncool, people will begin to move on with the crowd. I have a theory that most people don't truly even like things, and they just sort of shift with the winds of the crowd, but that is another topic for another day. The more people who shout gaming is dead, lame, uncool, or whatever, the fewer people are going to want to game. The social pressures will be too high, making it much harder for the industry trying to rebuild. Yes, a lot of people will still continue to game and ignore those naysayers. But like with anything, once something becomes uncool, it turns into a niche. Niche industries get minimal investment. This would leave mostly those with passion projects, and leave indies fighting over an even smaller audience. Which leads me to my next point. Gaming contains many niches within the medium. Not all of our favorite genres are as mainstream as we like to believe, meaning if the medium itself becomes niche, you're limiting your reach even more. This can work in favor for mediums where it is much cheaper to produce works, such as underground hip-hop and vinyl. But in a world where even a game like Hand Cannon would cost in the low six figures to make, these niche games would not be made. Say goodbye to the visual novel mixed with a cooking sim and dating simulator mechanics. The moment the pool of gamers decreases, the incentive for indies to get quirky and weird decreases. Any indie dev or studio that would want to survive would shoot only for games that mass appeal to the very few remaining gamers, because it would virtually be impossible to micro-target an audience. Then we have consoles. If the entire industry crashes, I'm unsure if we would have any console manufacturers remaining outside of Nintendo. Microsoft loses money on Xbox, and Sony makes other electronic devices and entertainment products. About 1/3 of Sony's revenue comes from PlayStation, but if that shrunk to less than 10%, I think Sony would have a hard time convincing shareholders that gaming is a good investment. The same would go for Microsoft. I think Nintendo would remain because gaming is the largest part of their business, though I doubt you would see a console revision or even a new hardware anytime soon after the Switch 2. So with only PC and Nintendo, indies would have even fewer options to release their games. It puts all the competition in a few places, and it makes it even harder to get noticed. A crash wouldn't mean a complete stop of game releases, but it definitely would slow things down. After the crash of 1983, you could still find new releases, especially for computer-based systems, but it took a while for the industry to recover and to bring investment back to the medium. I know many don't like to talk about money and video games in the same conversation, but money is what drives all industry, even for us indies. Most of us want to make a full-time living from our craft, and many are chasing major successes like Stardew Valley. A crash would not be good for us, indies or gamers alike. So we all better hope that the AAA side of the industry finally rights the ship and gets back on track. That's it for today, everyone. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your time.